Anybody love a good story? You like to laugh, maybe a story, you're laughing, you're crying, it takes you on a roller coaster. I love a good story. In fact, one of my favorite things to do is get together with friends, family, loved ones, maybe eat something, and just recite stories together. Maybe of our past, of something that recently happened, and just laugh and learn about one another and share these moments of our lives. But what I love about a story specifically is it often shows sides of people you wouldn't otherwise see, or reveal something you wouldn't otherwise know. And I want to take us, as we study John chapter 9, to this story of Jesus encountering this blind man. And how this blind man in this encounter would see something of Jesus maybe he wasn't able to see, and also be revealed to something that he didn't yet know. In John chapter 9, verse 1 through 3, this is what it says. It says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus answered. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. Oftentimes, our suffering, the things we face in life, the things we may not have chosen, the things we feel like are hindering us or hurting us, oftentimes, it's a setup for God to show his power, love, and healing in ways people and ourselves couldn't otherwise see. The title of my message today is, I'm blind for a reason. I'm blind for a reason. Let me kind of walk you through this moment together. Jesus is with the disciples, and they're on this journey. They're walking, and they come across this man who is blind from birth. And they encounter this man, and the disciples, they have this question, why is he blind? Was it his sin? Was it his parents' sin that led him to face the repercussions or what he is currently encountering? Jesus is like, it's neither. But just a side note, what I love about Jesus is just as we're coming out of chapter 8, right before chapter 9, Jesus was just about to be stoned. The people were upset and accusing him of blasphemy because he was claiming to be God. But Jesus, he makes it out. He gets out the jam. But what I love about this is that for many of us, if we were to encounter a possibility of death, even sometimes just hardship alone for doing the Father's will, we would be like, all right, God, they were picking up stones ready to throw it at me. I think I'm going to chill out on this for a moment. But in the next moment, Jesus was still about his Father's business, and I love that. He's all about his Father's business. And so Jesus, with his disciples, he gives this response to them, saying it's neither. But the disciples' initial thought and response to this man, this blind man, is interesting. Later in chapter 9, this blind man would also be recorded as a beggar in addition to his blindness. But the disciples, rather than looking at this man who is struggling, who is blind, who needs help to be served or cared for in a certain way, instead of saying, Jesus, how can we bless this man or help this man? They say, Jesus, why is this man blind? Like, was it his sin? Was it his parents? And it's an interesting way for their thought to drift to that initially. Unless you know a little bit about the contextual background of the Jewish culture at this time. See, The Jews around this time had some interesting beliefs and ideas around the repercussions of sin and what could happen if one sinned. Let me just give you a few. See, some of the Jews of that time, they believed in the pre-existence of souls and the possibility that those pre-existing souls could sin. So maybe this man existed before and he sinned, and so this is why he's encountering what he's encountering. Some of the Jews of that time believed in some kind of reincarnation, and perhaps the man sinned in a previous lifetime, and so he's just reaping what he sowed in a different life. And then some of the Jews at that time believed that a baby might sin in the womb. So maybe this man sinned while he was in the womb. He's encountering what he was encountering. And they even thought that maybe the punishment was for sin that the man would later commit in his life. So the disciples have this framework of thought that leads them to this question. It's an interesting way to think about things, some interesting beliefs, some interesting dynamics of what's before you and where does my mind drift to immediately. And many of us, we like to think of ourselves in the story a little bit better. We always like to think like, man, if I was in the disciples' shoes, I would have responded differently, right? It's like Jesus, as he's being taken, y'all are like, Peter, how could you deny him? I would have stood 10 toes down with Jesus, right? I would have fought for Jesus. I would have been back, right? We like to assume we have a better position or response than the disciples, but I would venture to say that many of us respond similarly in our lives to those that we face or see that are struggling, to those who need help, to those who are longing for assistance or to be served. I mean, I want you to think about it for a moment. We live in the city of Philadelphia, and all around us, there's brokenness. All around, I mean, you don't have to drive further than 2 miles, 1 mile to see somebody who is bound, who is broken, maybe bound to addiction. And I would ask you this, where does your mind go when you see these individuals who are struggling? Does it lean initially into compassion, or might you say that your mind drifts to thoughts like, well, what did they do to get here? What choices did they make that landed them in this position right now? I was presented the same context. I chose differently. They could have done that. I made sure I didn't succumb to my circumstance. I rose above it. Where does your mind drift to initially when you see people who are struggling, who are broken? Does it lean into compassion, or does it lean into this idea of looking at people as a problem to be solved? Because the disciples, here they are presented with somebody who's hurting, and rather than taking the position of initially, how can I respond and help? They look at this as a theological question to be answered. And I think as followers of Christ, we have to prioritize where our thoughts go and how our response should be. In other words, I think we have to prioritize caring more about the person than the problem. We have to care more about the person than the problem. And hear me, I'm not talking about enabling. I'm not talking about letting people go on in their bad habits and patterns and things that they're doing or participating in that always end up leading themselves into the place that I'm not saying that. However, our initial response to people when they find themselves in turmoil or suffering, it's not necessarily that we shouldn't be concerned about the problem. We are. But priority of focus is we should be more concerned about the person than the problem the person finds themselves in. Because sometimes the problems people face are self-induced, but sometimes they're not. Either way, our immediate response should be of compassion for the individual, not what and how did something happen. And some of us, we struggle with this thought. It's like we want to know why. We're obsessed with the why. It's like, God, why? Pastor X, why? But the thing is, like, when they find themselves in that situation, when you find yourself in that situation, the why's not always going to lean itself to do good for you. Sometimes it can, but not all the time. And specifically in this moment, when they're seeing this man blind, was it his parents' sin? Was it his sin? That why is irrelevant. There's a man blind and suffering that needs the Savior. Some of us, we have to get less caught up in the thought process of why God? How could this happen, God? How could you let this happen, God? Because when you have an understanding that we live in a world that is broken, that has the repercussions of sin, where death is prevalent, sickness is prevalent, all these different things, most of the time, we already know why in a general sense. We have the basis for that. Why do people find themselves suffering or in hardship? Well, because of the repercussions of sin and the brokenness of humanity. Most of the time, we already have that basis. So a better theological thought to ponder upon is not, God, how did this happen? But God, now that this happened, how can I help? Now that this happened, how can I help? I love this quote from Spurgeon. It says, "It is ours not to speculate, but to perform acts of mercy and love according to the tenor of the gospel. Let us then be less inquisitive and more practical, less for cracking doctrinal nuts and more for bringing forth the bread of life to the starving multitude." So in other words, when you see someone hurting, help them. When someone comes to you going through it, love on them. When somebody comes to you and they're feeling hopeless and discouraged, give them a loving word and a word of encouragement. When somebody is looking to connect because they're feeling lonely, take them out for coffee. Go to lunch with them. When you see somebody struggling on the streets, man, how can I serve you? How can I bless you? How can I pray over you? In other words, let's put into practice what Jesus has demonstrated for us in his life. Let's love people where they're at. Give less thought to the why, to the how God did this happen. But how can I lean in to serve? Brianna and I, oftentimes, or multiple times, we have come across an individual, a young person, being in youth ministry and youth pastoring where they maybe didn't have the best environment. And as soon as they graduated, they had to look for somewhere to live. And so Bria and I, we've taken people in before, multiple times for seasons of life. And I'm not saying that for everybody. If the Lord leads you in it, if you have the margin to do it, if it's okay to do it, and God leads you, God bless you. But looking where people are and loving them where they're at, becoming practical, not why did they get here, how did they get here, but how can I help that they are here? Verse 3, It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus answered. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. Powerful. Powerful. Let me break this down for you. So Jesus is saying it wasn't because of specific sin on his end or his parents' end. It wasn't either. It was not caused by specific sin, but the man's blindness essentially is a birth defect. And birth defects and other such tragedies can be because of sinful behavior of the parents. If they're pregnant and maybe they're negligent or whatever the case may be. But far more often, and in the case right here, it seems to be that it's simply by the repercussions of sin in our fallen world. The sin of Adam and Eve that set the principle of death and its associated destruction in the world, and we have had to deal with it ever since. So, response to the disciples wasn't because of his sin, his parents' sin, just the repercussions of sin in this world. But this happened so the power of God could be seen in him. Speaking to this man's situation, Jesus told them that even this man's blindness was factored in and considered and brought into the fold and orchestrated within the plan of God so that the power of God could be seen in him. Maybe, just maybe, the thing in your life that you're convinced has robbed you of what could be is the thing that God will use to show you what can be in your life. Maybe there is something that you are facing, something that you were born with, some physical ailment, some circumstance you face, some mental health diagnosis, whatever the case may be. Maybe this thing that you have convinced yourself has robbed you of what could be in your life will be the thing that God uses and puts his power on display to show you what can be in your life. I want you to think about all the times this little boy who was blind asked his mom, and why am I blind? Why can I not see? And the mom not really having an answer for it. Maybe she has some response, but it doesn't really help or make things better. And Jesus is speaking to this situation, and he's like, he's blind, but I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this for a reason. Not that he caused the boy to be blind, not that he orchestrated for the boy to be blind from birth so that his power could be put on display, but factoring in, because of the repercussions of sin, factoring in the tragedy, the suffering of humanity, factoring in that this boy would be born blind, that he would use it in his divine plan to orchestrate something that would be beautiful. I love this quote in reflection of this passage of Scripture, and this verse specifically. This is what it says. It says, this does not mean that God deliberately caused the child to be born blind in order that after many years his glory should be displayed in the removal of the blindness. To think so would again be a reflection on the character of God. It does mean that God overruled the disaster of the child's blindness so that when the child grew to manhood, he might, by the recovering of his sight, see the glory of God in the face of Christ, and others, seeing the work of God, might turn to the true light of the world. Come on, somebody. Come on, somebody. Aren't you thankful that God can overrule whatever thing you're facing and use it for his glory and your benefit and others' benefit as well? I like to say it like this. Whatever you're facing, wherever you're at, whatever has taken place, whatever physical ailment, whatever emotional problem you have, whatever mental, God may not have caused it, but he'll use it. God may not have caused it, but he'll use it. Hear me today. wherever you find yourself, at one of our locations, I want to let you know that you may not have chosen the thing that has happened to you. It was not by your own doing or by your own fault. And even if it was, you find yourself here today hopeless, looking at it like, God, how could you possibly redeem this? How could you possibly touch this and make beauty of this? I want to let you know, God did not cause it, but he will use it. He has a plan for it. He can orchestrate. If you put it in his hands, what he can do with it is unimaginable. God didn't cause the trauma, but he'll use it. God didn't cause the diabetes, but he'll use it. God didn't cause the mental health issue, but he'll use it. God didn't cause the cancer, but he'll use it. Hear me, God didn't cause the physical disability, but he'll use it. You're not away or out of the realm of God using you and using what has transpired in your life where you find yourself. God can use it. Will you put it in his hands? Will you trust him? Because God, he's not in the business of bringing harm, but God's also not in the business of letting things go to waste. So the thing that you look at as surely only death can come from this, God looks at it and he's saying, I'm going to bring life from this thing. I'm going to bring life from this thing. I'm going to write a story with this. I'm going to write a story with this. This blind man, he's going to have a story. And God often uses these moments of suffering, these things of suffering in our life, and he uses them to bring us to him, to get our attention, and to our ultimate benefit, that we would surrender our life to him. I want to read you a story today from a woman. Her name is Jaleesa. She attends our Northwest location. It's a powerful story of how God used what many, and what even herself would consider to be a very dark thing or problematic thing or suffering moment for his glory and her benefit. I'm going to read it word for word as she typed it out because it's powerful. She said, on December 27th, 2023, my life changed forever when I received a breast cancer diagnosis. And after anxiously checking my chart for the results, I came across it. In an instant, my world froze as I confronted my greatest fear, death. A few days later, after more invasive testing, I broke down sobbing on a train ride home. Emotionally drained, I realized I already had the answer to the overwhelming fear I was facing, something my mom had introduced to me long ago, the everlasting love of Jesus. When I reached my car, I surrendered my life to Christ and immediately felt a deep, unexplainable peace. From that moment on, my faith became my foundation, my anchor, and my strength. The year 2024 tested me in every way imaginable. I faced not only physical battles, but challenges to my spirit, marriage, relationships, and mental resilience. Alongside my cancer diagnosis, I carried a genetic mutation which brought more difficult decisions. My treatment included 16 rounds of chemotherapy, 26 rounds of immunotherapy, a double mastectomy, reconstruction, surgery. Every step pushed me to my absolute limits. Yet through it all, I stand victorious. Though my journey isn't over and the mutation still carries implications for my future and for my daughter, I found that my faith is stronger than my fight. Trusting in God's love has not only helped me survive, but has given me purpose, peace, and lasting hope. This is what she ends with. This is what she ends with. She said, the only reason I share is to let others know what God is capable of. If he can do it for me, he can do it for you too. Come on, somebody. Come on, somebody. Come on, somebody. God didn't cause it, but he'll use it. And he'll use it to draw you to the feet of the cross. He'll use it to bring his name glory and for your benefit. Let me tell you something today. Today, Jaleesa, she said, I'm surrendered to Christ. She said, I'm actually cancer-free right now. Come on, somebody. I've been able to travel more, which I have a passion to do. And she's testifying, speaking to those who may find themselves in similar situations and scenarios, encountering maybe similar physical ailments. But let me tell you something today. The same God that led Jaleesa to the foot of the cross and does the miraculous with her can do the same in your life. He may not have caused it, but he'll use it for sure. That's a guarantee to you. You put it in his hands, he'll do something with it. That thing you thought was robbing you, he'll use that thing in your life to rob hell. He'll use it to testify to people. He'll use it to instill hope into people's lives. He'll use it so that many would come and say, Jesus, I got to place my faith in you, that his power would be put on display in your life. That's the beautiful thing about Jesus. He gave her purpose with it. Man, let me tell you something. God's not into wasting things. He's got purpose. God, I need you. I don't know what to do. I don't know what this could. Man, put it in his hands. Watch how he redeems it. And this man, later on in the chapter, we'll see him encounter the miraculous. And in Jaleesa's case, she's encountered the same. But let me tell you something today. Not to get caught up on the why and the how. Because though he does this in their lives in this way, he may do it differently in yours. He may do it differently in the person that you know. He may do it differently. He may bring healing now on the other side of eternity. But here's what's sure, is if you put it in his hands, he'll show you the purpose for it. I'm blind for a reason, but you have to trust that God's plan is perfect. His plan is perfect. And you and I, we're not able to comprehend. Sometimes we're not able to think through and fully see the big picture of our lives. That's why the scriptures say, lean not on your own understanding, but on every word of God. His ways are higher than our ways. You couldn't begin to fathom what he can orchestrate and do. You just got to take a position and a posture of saying, I trust you, Lord. I trust you, Lord. I'm going to stand in it. I'm just going to stand in it, Lord. I trust you. I believe that your plan is perfect for my life. And I'm going to put it in your hands. You do that, and the story that's written with your life would be so far beyond all you could think, ask, or imagine.